All right, guys, let's get into sedimentary rocks. So, the first thing I want to say about sedimentary rocks is they are not as pretty. So, they don't get as much kind of attention, maybe, as metamorphic rocks are, and even as some igneous rocks. Some igneous rocks are really pretty. Igneous rocks are extremely hard because of forming from magma, so they get used in buildings. In my opinion, sedimentary rocks are the most kind of undervalued but underestimated, and shouldn't be out of the types of rocks. What is my favorite thing about sedimentary rocks, and why, even though they kind of look more just like plain and just kind of like dirt, they are just really awesome because they are what we say is a snapshot into the past. So a snapshot, that's what we used to call pictures before, so it's kind of like a selfie. So a snapshot into the past means that it's letting us look back in time. So when we talked about Pangea and we talked about putting pieces of the puzzle together, sedimentary rocks preserved history for us to be able to look back on. So we can look back at fossils, we can look at formations, we can look at cross bedding, we can look at ripple marks that show us where oceans were. We can see what the paleo environment used to look like. We can tell what kind of animals used to live there. We can date rocks based on the kinds of fossils that we find. So that's where I tend to nerd out over sedimentary rocks. So sedimentary rocks get classified by their mode of formation. That means how and where they're formed. So our first type of sedimentary rocks, here are clastic sedimentary rocks. This is highlighted not because it's a link, just because it's important. Clastic sedimentary rocks are the most common. These are the kind of rocks that form at Earth's surface. So we'll look at the rock cycle more coming up, but these are going to form because of uplift and then weathering and erosion, which you learned about yesterday. So clast means a piece. So when we have all of these pieces of other rocks, we have clasts that build up on our surface. Those build up, they accumulate, they pile up, and then they undergo the process of lithification after they've been deposited. So they're going to go through then compaction and cementation. So clastic sedimentary rocks are going to be our most common. So I'm going to talk the most about them. Clastic sedimentary rocks are classified then, after they're classified as clastic, they get classified by their grain size. So that it's pretty easy, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So we're going to start with coarse grain rocks. We're going to look at them. You can see big chunks in them. So that makes them coarse grained. Our two main types of coarse grain rocks are conglomerate and breccia. And so I'm not very good with this camera yet. So conglomerate, you can see those like really nice rounded pebbles in it. Kind of looks like concrete. And really, like, conglomerate sounds like concrete. And then the breccia, the piece that I have actually isn't very good. The piece that you have, the picture on the slide, is a lot better. Both are coarse grain. The difference is that conglomerate has these really rounded, worn down pebbles. So that tells us that those clasts, or the sediments that make it up, traveled and weathered for a really long time. So they are very well weathered and eroded. They went far before they were deposited and formed into a rock. Breccia is going to have these much more angular particles in them, and that tells us that they weathered and then were compacted and cemented very quickly after they were weathered. So they didn't travel as far and get as nice and worn down. This is a huge piece of conglomerate. This is in Boston. This is the Boston Museum of Science, which is one of the coolest museums. It is where they filmed Bill Nye Electricity there. They have a lightning room in the museum where they have these huge Van de Graaff generators. So look it up. There's tons of videos on YouTube. Super awesome museum. But outside they have a rock garden. So this was a field trip for Nate and I's birthday. We always take field trips for our birthdays are only a month apart. So we do a summer field trip. And my part of the field trip was the Boston Museum of Science. Nathan's was visiting Fenway Park. So double field trip there. But you can see that some of these particles are like almost as big as Nate's head. Obviously, he was smaller then than he is now. But really, really big, very rounded pebbles. And this rock was actually from Boston, Massachusetts. There is a lot of conglomerate. You can find conglomerate out if you're out hiking and you look at a rock and you're like, wow, it looks like somebody plopped a piece of cement here. It's probably conglomerate.